regarding the paper and also future research possibilities and maybe collaboration if it's possible. Okay, so I will share my screen first. Wait, seems there's a little problem. Wait, okay, so this is a paper, titled and Seeking Undercover, Corruption and Public Spending Composition in Indonesia. And first, I will present you the outline. So we will discuss the introduction and the motivation regarding this paper, and then literature review, maybe a brief regarding the previous works on this topic. And then the third is the data we use for this paper. This is a novel data set. So maybe we can introduce it to you, and then maybe you can, if you want to use it for your own research, then it is publicly accessible. And the third is methodology, maybe just a brief, and then the fifth is the results from the paper, and last, conclusion, and maybe the future research possibility and research get from this paper. Okay, so from the introduction, maybe it's a common knowledge that public officials committing corruption might skew spending towards activities that are most prone to rent seeking. So if there is a sector that is mostly prone to rent seeking, then public officials tend to spend more on those allocations. And we all know from basic Econ 101 that this type of rent-seeking behavior will result in welfare loss for the society. And so me and my colleague, we try to investigate whether the rent-seeking activities are prominent in the local public spending composition in the provincial level of Indonesia. So why provincial level of Indonesia? Maybe because it is caused by the data constraint. So we want to actually delve more into district level of Indonesia, but mining the data set availability, it is not possible for us to do that. Okay, and so maybe just a brief about the previous works. Yeah, we know that there are many factors that are affecting public spending, such as the welfare of the people. So the initial level and the endowment level welfare of the people actually affecting the public spending composition, and also the demographic status. So maybe for region with high age dependency level, they tend to spend more into health allocation. Nonetheless, public spending is also subject from the political process. We all know that, such as political preference, voter preference, and also the interest from particular group from the Baker 1983. And corruption activities such as bribery is an integral part of political aspect, and also it is affecting the public spending. So for example, bureaucrats tend to receive bribes from private sector who wants to grease the wheel for their activities. And several evidence, including from Mauro 1998 to Cortis and Milieu in 2015. So there are lots of body of work that has been committed into this type of question, but there has been no any paper regarding the Indonesia context and also using a more detailed data. So the data we use is from Cegah Korupsi from Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Gadjah Mada. So basically, this data is individual level corruption data set. So we have the name of the convicted, we have the dates for the prosecution, for the Pengadilan Negeri, Pengadilan Tinggi, Mahkamah Agung, and then peninjauan kembali, etc. For the occupation as well, and religion too, it is available in the data. So initially, we collect the data into provincial level from 2010 to 2016. But in our regression analysis, we only include 2010 and 2013 due to the limited data for the control variable. So it is very unfortunately. And for the control variables, we use conventional regional data set from the Central Bureau of Statistics, which is the population, gross domestic regional product, and also gross education enrollment rate for secondary school. And we also include for our dependent variable, which is the province level budget allocation data obtained from DJPK Kemenkeu. And for a given province, we sum the budget of all district or city governments within that province. So if there is no existing province level budget allocation from the JPK Kemenkeu, we search for this district within the province and then sum of all the budget, okay, within that province. So this is just a brief insight from our data set. This is from the Excel. So we have the source of the document from Capita, and then the year, and then the number kasus, and then the name of the convicted, birthplace of the convicted, gender, religion, occupation, and then we have the date for the prosecution, for the pengadilan negeri, pengadilan tinggi, etc. And also the welfare law, the laws for the nation, and also the final verdict. We have also the final verdict. So this data is actually quite complete, quite exhaustive, but you need to do I don't know, a lot works in the data cleaning process since the data is quite massive. Okay, so the methodology, we deploy fixed effects regression on the level of the province to estimate the association of corruption and public spending. So we don't use a basic ordinarily square regression because we suspect that each province has unique heterogeneity that we assume to be time invariant, such as the endowment of the province, the culture, and also norm and geographic aspects, which we deem as time invariant. Okay, so this is we deem them as time invariant. And in general, the model is like this. So for the dependent variable, we have the public spending, which is the budget allocation for public service, social protection programs, economic program, education, health, and housing. And our main variable interest is corruption cases per capita, which is corruption case divided by the population. So why we divide the population? Because if we use just a nominal corruption case, we suspected that it will create a bias in our estimation. So we divide it into population to make it a relative unit. So, and the other is X is the control variables, A subscribe E is the time fixed effect, and last var epsilon is the time variant error. So we thought that the time fixed effect will control the time invariant unobservable who can affect the results. Okay, so this is the descriptive statistics. So first is the corruption cases by type per province. So if we look closely, or maybe just briefly from the graph, we can see that most of the cases come from perangkat PNS and also non-PNS, or from the civil servant. And maybe the second most prominent source is from the private sector and etc. And then the leadership of the legislative agency. So we can see that there are lots of heterogeneity across the province regarding the corruption cases by type. And then for the corruption cases per capita, I think some province like Sumatera Selatan, and then Riau, Lampung, Jawa Timur, Jawa Tengah, they have a relatively high corruption cases per capita level. Okay, so if we look closely into the y-axis, we can look at region like Sumatera Selatan and also Riau. They tend to have a high number of corruption cases per capita. And then this is the association of corruption, population, and income level, and we can see that Papua and Kalimantan Selatan, they tend to be outlier, and also DKI Jakarta, they tend to be DKI Jakarta regarding the average GDRP per capita. I think it is quite sensible, Jakarta, but for the corruption cases per capita, Kalimantan Selatan and Papua tend to be outlier. We suspect that this is because Papua and Kalimantan Selatan tend to have low level of population, but nevertheless, this is just an insight from the data. And so for the budget allocation by province, I think we can see that there is some kind of, it seems quite homogeneous. So most of the budget comprised from the public service mostly, and then the education comes from the second. I think this is caused by the mandatory law from the government who mandated local government to allocate more into the education sector. Okay, and this is for simple correlation. This is for the education, and we can see that we can draw any conclusion from the correlation here. And then for public service as well, health too, they tend to be not skewed towards positive, negative, and for housing too. And then for the social program, the correlation or the association is positive here, but we can infer any causality there. And the same case from like the social program is for economic program. Okay. And so for the results, first we display the regression without control variables, and we can see that corruption cases per capita have positive association with public service, social protection programs, and economic programs, and also education programs, but negative relationship with housing allocation. And as for the health, we find no significant evidence to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, and if we include the control variables, the results change a lot. So corruption per capita now significantly associated with social protection programs and health, which is positively correlated and also negatively correlated with housing. So if we want to try to draw conclusion or draw any meaning from these numbers, we can say that corruption per capita is actually associated to social protection programs, to health, to housing, despite their sign. Because if there is any evidence for significant or for association of corruption per capita towards public spending, we can say that yes, those public spending allocation is prone towards corruption or towards rent-seeking activities. Okay, so nonetheless, the sign, this is an evidence that corruption per capita is associated with public spending composition. So maybe some possible explanations for social protection. So we know that major programs like PKH or PPNT are from central government, but local governments have jurisdiction to distribute social assistance program. And this may be particularly prone to rent seeking in the form of in-kind procurement, markups, and also illegal distribution fees. So maybe this is the possible explanation for the social protection. Whereas for the health, I think we think that certain types of health spending, such as hospital and health equipment, might be prone towards corruption. And this is similar to Cortis 2014's finding in the US that health and hospitals are among categories positively related with state level corruption. Okay. But unfortunately, we didn't find any evidence that the corruption cases in our samples are systematically related to social protection and health, because the data can't tell you what type of conviction the convicted has to bear with. So we don't know the cases detail. We have to check it manually, but we don't have time for that. Okay, so for the conclusion is that, well, we know that corruption is associated with public spending, so particularly for allocations that are heavily related with public procurement. So we know that. But nevertheless, we know that these papers still have one major weakness, which is we can't infer any causality between corruption and public spending. Why? First, because the reverse causality. We suspect that maybe corruption can affect the public spending, but vice versa. The public spending is also can affect the corruption case. So there is a problem of reverse causality there. And the second is the indigeneity problem. So based on Orkan 2016, corruption is relatively deterministic from the institution and also indigenous. Okay, so corruption is not an exogenous factor, but rather an endogenous factor that is affected by the quality of the institution setting. So these are the two main problems from our estimation. And maybe for the further research opportunity, so maybe if you want to uh, make something out of it, is to deploy instrumental variable to isolate the total effect of the corruption and to tackle the reverse causality and also the endogeneity problem. Okay, so I think that is all for me. Thank you so much. Back to the moderator. Okay, so I'm the moderator as well. So, okay, so thank you, Ghifari, for the presentation. Now we open the Q&A session. So the floor is yours for anyone who wants to ask question. Okay, so for Pa, I don't know. Wait.
Prof. Budi first.
Okay, so Prof. Budi. Okay, so Prof. Budi, maybe do you have any question for Mas Ghifari regarding the paper?
Oh yeah, thank you very much. I think this is an interesting topic, and people are looking for data on corruption. However, one issue has always been is the reliability of data on corruption. So, I guess instead of you know hurrying up trying to do correlation or causality might be useful to understand exactly what these data tell us. And I think that will be valuable if you could actually explain that this data is really the level of corruption in each province, and also discuss what are the weakness of this data. And there are others data set that on corruption that available that you might want to compare how sensitive this data comparable to others. Now, because if you could argue that your data is reliable, you could write a paper, for example, not just a descriptive, just talking about uh, corruption gap or a corruption inequality, just showing those kind of descriptive is already interested. But if your data is not reliable, meaning that your data do not really represent the level of corruption in each province. For example, in your case, this is just a lot of other corruption is not being caught, so then it's not outside your data. How can you deal with that? You know, is the area that is have from your data has a low corruption, is that really that corruption is low? Are you measuring corruption by cases or by number or by size of corruption? So a lot of this discussion might be useful if you could discuss it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Budi Reso. So this is an actually interesting question, and we have concern regarding this. So first, the reliability of the data. So the recording of corruption case is, I don't know what you call it, is very heterogeneous across Indonesia. So for example, for the first case is that some of the pengadilan, they don't record or they don't upload the case. Hence, the data is quite truncated. So we have concern regarding this, and we delve more into it, and we find that the error caused by non-reported cases is rather random. So there is no systematically causes or systematically error that cause non-recorded cases. So at first we believe that it was random, hence we can proceed. And the second regarding the corruption is that corruption itself is an illicit activity. So we don't know the exact number. So this is kind of hard. And that's why if we can isolate the effect of the corruption, that would be great because it is an illicit activities. And the third is that the corruption itself is measured by cases. So we, what you call it, we total the number of cases per province and collapse it and then do the regression for finding the correlation as well. But maybe the reliability of the data and comparing with the other data set, we actually try to do that. We look for the corruption perception index across province level in Indonesia, but unfortunately it is unavailable exhaustively. And it's also available for, I don't know, 2008 to 2010, but it is first just for certain big cities in Indonesia. And the second, the year is not overlap well with our data. So the limitation for the data, we acknowledge that, but we just do the best we can from this data to infer any conclusion. Maybe my colleague Jesita, do you want to answer anything?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ghifari. I think your explanation has been quite extensive. And thank you, Professor Budi Reso, for the very insightful recommendation. So first of all, we actually try to compare with the corruption cases, corruption index per provinces. We have also emailed several NGOs who have recorded the data. However, there are several problems. One of it is regarding the missing values as well as missing data. So we cannot really collect a panel level types of data. And then secondly, also the problem lies on the fact that they have changed their methods of counting the corruption perception index from year to year, so it becomes somewhat uncomparable between years and across years. However, we do acknowledge several limitations in our data. For example, the first one is that there are many duplicated observations, as well that the fact that many variables, they suffer from prevalent missing values. So not all of them can be analyzed directly. And last but not least is that the corruption cases, they tend to be small in numbers for the early as well as for the later year between the period. And if we see the descriptive statistics, we can also see that Papua has the highest corruption case per capita. However, this is biased because of the fact that they have relatively smaller number of population living in the area. And if we see why the second province has the highest corruption level, which is South Kalimantan, followed by West Sulawesi, is that because in detail we can see that there is a unique case where 22 legislative members were accused of local budget misuse in the year 2009, causing an outlier of the regional corruption data. So there has been several analyses, both quantitatively as well as qualitatively, regarding the data, but we will definitely take into account of the recommendation of comparing the data set that we have with another types of data set that is available in the provincial level data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Professor Budi, do you have any replies for the presenter? Okay, so next from Pak Bangkit Wiryawan.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Mas. Why do I say Indonesia? All right, thank you very much, Mas Ghifari and the team, and for the excellent presentation. I think I'm more interested to see your descriptive statistics at this point. You have a very good data. The descriptive statistics can tell me more about your research, but then my suggestion is that you may not need to control for population because you leveled your data per capita, right? This one, yes. Yeah. So maybe you don't really need. I need the information with the some variables that you use log, but that's okay. Maybe for later. But my suggestion is that you may not need to put a population there. And my other suggestion, and maybe more of a question, you use 32 provinces, and which provinces are omitted? And maybe you have a reason. And so, of course, if you keep the data and you keep compiling the data more and more every year, it's going to be stronger eventually. So you can try that maybe this year and next year too. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pak Bangkit. Actually, this is very interesting for the population because actually we want to control for the number of the public servant in the province, because we think that can affect the public spending composition. But that is a very nice talk that we will consider it. And regarding the province that we omit Kalimantan Utara. Jesita, correct me if I'm wrong. Why we omit the Kalimantan Utara? Because Kalimantan Utara is still a relatively new province. So we omit the province. That's that. Okay. And maybe
okay. Continue. Sorry. Continue.
Oh no. I finished. Okay. So
okay. My other idea is you can locate like local elections or gubernatorial elections, and you can put dummy if there's a positive or negative correlation. That could be interesting. And then you can do the style like those Benjamin Olken and friends in the MIT. They use the dummy to estimate the dependent variables, and then use the dummy as the instrumental variables for your corruption per capita data. So if you read Esther Duflo's paper, she did that, and then followed by many others papers. So that is a strategy that I can recommend. But everything is good today, so don't worry. And you have a very good data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Bangkit. So this is actually about the election. Actually, we have already considered to include the local election as instrument. But the problem is that we don't know what time exactly the corruption has happened. So we don't know what time of the corruption. So we can't match the corruption and the local election. That's the first. So this makes, so how do we do the year? So how do we classify the year? So we classified based on the prosecution date, because we suspected that the prosecution date is the nearest date to the corruption case, not the PN, PT, MA, or PK date. So this is one of the main constraints from the data as well. And maybe the third, I don't know about the local election, because I don't know how to put it gently, because we still can incorporate the local election because of the some constraint. But yeah, that's a very nice idea suggestion. Okay, thank you, Pak Bangkit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, back to the moderator. Okay, as the moderator myself. So any other questions from the participants?
Maybe I would just like to give an additional point, Gif, but I'm not asking question to my own paper. So thank you very much, Bangkit, for your suggestion as well as for your question. So in addition to the fact that we exclude Kalimantan, we also exclude Papua province from the regression because it has a very high per capita value. And this is driven, as what I've mentioned before, by the small population in Papua. Therefore, we try to exclude Papua province to counter the possible bias that might happen. And for yes, I also agree with Ghifari regarding the time of the election, because the only data that we have is the persecution date, but we do not have the data of when the corruption happened. So when the data scrapping was available, it was only available by the prosecution date of the PKPTMA. So we do not really know and what exact time did the corruption actually happen case per cases, but we will take into account definitely regarding the other suggestions that you have mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe for the other participants, if you have any question, please, the floor is yours. All right, thank you very much. So thank you, myself and also Jesita for the presentation. And we move to the second paper from Pak Bangkit Wiryawan. Okay, are you ready, Pak?
Yep, I am here.
Jokowi Economic Effect.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
You see my slide, right? Okay.
Okay.
How long do I have?
15 minutes, I think.
Okay,
20 minutes. Sorry, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. All right.
20 minutes. Okay. The floor is yours.
Let me start. So, oh boy. So, the paper is titled "The Jokowi Economic Effect: Business Environment and Firm Growth in the Post-2012 Jakarta Election." So, this paper is talking about the situation between 2009 to 2015. So this is not about the recent situation. So this is the title is has a question mark in it. So it's not a final final answer to Jokowi's credibility or performance in Jakarta or even in Indonesia. So I hoped to further develop this paper. And this is so meaning that this is just initial studies of what happened in Jakarta after the local election in 2012. So without going on, let me start. Oh, give me 5 seconds. Okay, so the outline is just business as usual, introduction, results, conclusions, and appendices. And what motivates me is that when I look the data for Jakarta and I compare to 8 other provinces, and I immediately thinking about the theory of democracy and growth that was highlighted by Asamoglu and his team in his many publications, and then also the work of Professor Kaufman. That he is focusing on the governance and economic growth, and also Baro that wrote about the democracy and growth. And interestingly, Baro highlighted his result that there's no direct effect between democracy and growth, so it's indirect. So what is the channel? One of the other answer is coming from a group of researchers that coming in around 2004 and to date, that they're focusing on institutional quality to the thing that they call business environment that's improving, or better business environment is connect to better growth. All right, and then I plot those theories and literature reviews to what happened in Jakarta after the local elections. And there are some significant change in institutional quality. So meaning that I use the perception data. Firms' perceptions of institutions in Jakarta has been better between the period before and after the local election. So those are my motivation, and the objective of this research today, there are 2. First is to measure, estimate the change in Jakarta's business environment or institutional quality under Jokowi before and after, and compare between Jakarta and its neighboring provinces, and then to estimate the change, that change in institutional quality, does it connect with the firm growth in terms of total sales output growth or productivity growth under the leadership of Jokowi between 2012 and 2015. And as a background, it's all started with the 1998 reform, or we call it reformasi, and then so one of the demand of reformasi was democratization at the local level, that also decentralization. And by that kicks in the 1999 decentralization law, the first one, number 22, and it gave way to at the first stage is the administrative decentralization, with the creation of new provinces such as Banten province and Bangka Belitung, and then autonomous cities like Batam City in the Riau province island. Then step by step in 2001, fiscal decentralization coming with giving larger fiscal resources to the local governments, either at the province level or local level. And then in 2005, the government introduced direct local elections. All these movements are downwards, the democratic process and decentralized. So this opens up for local leadership competition. This is where Jokowi came in 2005 from a humble origin in the city of Solo. And he has several or many distinct leadership style, but I highlighted 2 of his leadership style. First is he is perceived as a guy, a clean-cut good guy, non-transactional good governance practice. That's also captured by some other studies. This one, Hamid, is my colleague in Indonesia University. And then the second one is this Blusukan leadership style that is not found in the other local leaders at that time. So these things made him popular Blusukan is the way that I think everybody knows here that he is inspecting development process or his policy at the local level, either the policy that has been executed or ongoing policy. So he's doing that sometimes in incognito modes, and this makes him popular and bring him to Jakarta. So in 2012 is the Jakarta local election. This is one of the fiercest local election in Indonesia and very complex. And in 2012, this is the first election that widely deployed like a social media campaign and among many other things. And from 5 contestants, I believe it was 5 couples running for the elections, and down to only 2 with the Jokowi Ahok couples won with the 53.8% of votes against 46 for Foke and Nara. Now we want to see what happened before Jokowi was elected as a governor of Jakarta under the governorship of Fauzi Bowo. Starting a business in Jakarta, you can see that it may, in terms of number of procedures, I took this data from the doing business indicators, has been good, but other cities here, is also moving at the same direction. So in terms of comparison, Jakarta is not that much better, but the number of procedures is something that is set. Maybe there's so much local government can do to improve in this area. But in things of numbers of days of starting a business, Jakarta has been improving under Fauzi Bowo. But maybe I argue that that's not that much. Semarang, the capital of Central Java, has been improving much more than Jakarta. And comparably to Jakarta is Surabaya. So some other regions are improving. Jakarta is also improving, but the best one was Semarang. So meaning that there are some improvement, but maybe not that much. And especially when we look at the second variables, what happened in Jakarta before Jokowi was getting construction permits. So in terms of number of procedures is not that much difference between 2010 and 2012. But in terms of numbers of days, there's no significant improvement under Fauzi Bowo. In other cities, they managed to cut down number of days in getting construction permits. So this, I argue that this is directly related to firms' performance. Either they want to expand their activities, they expand their business, or they want to do anything that relates to that requires them to deal with the government. This captures some of those. So that is under Fauzi Bowo. And then we looked when Jokowi take over Jakarta between 2012 and 2015. We start to see that there's improvement. This score here. So for this data, I use the survey data from the World Bank Enterprise Survey released in 2015, and I use the option of the panel option. And how you read this score is that lower is better. Okay, so lower is better, meaning that in 2009 it's almost 0.5, but it's decreasing 0.33, and the difference in between the periods and in between I compare Jakarta with the neighboring regions, the direct neighbors, West Java province and the Banten province, that Jakarta has scored higher in terms of business getting business permit or dealing with the business permits. And then in the area of informal payments, I built a dummy variables. So every firms that has been required to provide money, gifts, or anything that is not formal is here. So we see that actually there's a slight decrease, but maybe under Jokowi is not that negative, so it's a little bit higher, so meaning that's not that good. But the difference in difference coefficient is very small for me. It's below 0.05, so I think it's considerably small. But let's move on to the last one. In terms of perception of corruption, this is a perception data. So firms are asked about corruption issue. And then we start to see that between 2009, 2009 is 0.6, but it's down to minus 18 when we compare Jakarta to the neighboring province. And the net difference is 0.82. So that's quite large differences for the favor of Jakarta. So by this data, I see that there's a large difference in Jakarta happening after the 2012 election. And especially this is not, this does not happen for the other provinces, neighboring provinces, Banten and West Java. So I use a difference in difference estimator and using Jakarta as the treated group and West Java and Banten as the control group. And I deployed a fixed effect regression. And what else? Oh, I also use the entropy balancing matching. It's a kind of propensity score matching, but it has different methods. It doesn't drop number of observations. So let's move on to the result. If you're interested in the definition, you can see, and I have sent you on the chat box my presentation materials today. And let's go straight to the result. And the standard OLS suggests that there's indeed, remember that lower is better. So meaning that negative is and significant for Jakarta, meaning that they are improving for real. And then the fixed effect results is also the same, but not for informal payment. So actually, when we put it in the regression, that the informal payment is negative, but then still the same with the manual calculation that it's very small, 0.00. So in terms of perception of corruptions and firms' perceptions of dealing or getting business permits for Jakarta, it has been lower, which is good for Jakarta. And this is without control for confounding variables. And then this is the full model. And when I use the first dependent variables using outputs, you can see here my DID result is positive, but it's not significant. But when we talk about productivity on the second part of the equation, I use productivity. I define it as a per worker output. So total sales output divided by number of workers. And I put the log transformation of that numbers here. So for this result in this table, how you see is that the higher the better, because we are talking about productivity growth. So increasing number for firms located in Jakarta, right? And then you can also see some other variables that I use. And I think strangely for me that exporting percentage of export does not significantly correlate it with output or productivity. So, but anyway, let me go back to this. For column 3 and column 6, I employed the entropy balancing matching method. And you can see that it's still significant. So meaning that what happened in Jakarta under Jokowi, that firms are growing, but in terms of sales output, maybe not that significant, but in terms of firm productivity per worker's output, it has been strong and significant. And this is the scatter plot of firms' outputs and number of workers that you can see for Jakarta, the triangle symbol here. It's constantly up here compared to the control group in West Java and in Banten and Banten. And of course, you can see that in the control group in those two provinces, there's also some companies up here, but most of them are down here, right? And figure 2 is the coefficient of the interactions, and then the horizontal side is the age of the firms. So meaning that the numbers on the right is the firms that is surveyed in 2015, and you can see many of them are on the upsides of the graph. on the upper right side of the graph, and some of them are below, but then for the control group is constantly below the zero line. So they have a negative growth, but in Jakarta, there are many provinces that is growing positively, right? And so what can be concluded from here that the reform and political decentralization between 1998 to 2005 in Indonesia has opened competition among local leaders, and this gave way to the rise of Jokowi from Solo, gaining popularity with his distinct leadership style at the local level, and then he is recognized, getting national traction and winning the Jakarta election. And then I observed that in after he was elected as a governor, there's a increasing score of institutional quality. So meaning that there's a stronger business environment in Jakarta's under Jokowi. And the results, firstly, the results suggest that there's a zero 0.8 to zero 0.9 stronger institutional quality under him if we compare to neighboring provinces. And then that translates also to the firm growth and productivity. And as we saw in the table 6, that it's significant in for firms productivity with around 3.1, roughly around 3.1 to 3.7% increase. And my other heterogeneity analysis showed that the impact is larger for large firms, is better for big firms with the numbers of workers more than 100 or more workers. That is in the Appendix B, and the findings seems to confirm the nexus between democracy, institutions, and growth. The channel is the local election, and then from local elections, competent leaders are elected. It brings better institutions and better firm growth. And that demonstrates that local democracy and regional autonomy could be an important channel to promote stronger institutions in Indonesia. Jakarta has that positive result, maybe, but maybe Jakarta is special. I don't know. I want to study more, looking at the other provinces. Is it only happens to like a specific case, maybe only because of some figures that can do this, or is it a general case? And of course, we know that in Indonesia, many other regions has been not performing very well. So it could be this result could be isolated too because of the figure effect. And lastly, the process here that's shown by Jokowi that's opened the way for local leaders to climb up national leadership, and he was capitalized this moment and winning the national election in 2014. So meaning that this could be a way for other local leaders to promote like a good governance, to promote strong business environments. So that will translate to growth, but maybe not only growth, but also other qualities, welfare of the society that will, increase their popularity at the national level. So with that, I would like to end my presentation. Terima kasih banyak. And if you have any questions, comments, or clarifications, I would like to, hear them. Thank you very much. And some references if you are interested. And this is the descriptive statistic. I put it in the back. And this is the triple difference estimation as my heterogeneity analysis. And you can see that large firms enjoy more if you compare to the smaller firms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Bangkit. So we move to the question and answer question. So I have questions for you, but maybe I will let other participants, if other participants have any questions, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or to raise your hand.
I think you should ask first.
Okay. Okay, I will ignite the discussion here.
Okay.
Thank you, Pak Bangkit. So a very interesting paper actually, because we know that we always want to know the Jokowi effect for the economy. Okay,
Thank you.
this is very interesting. So, but my first question is regarding the sample selection.
Yep.
So, how do you? So this is a difference in difference setting, right?
Yep. Yep.
So we want to make sure between the treated and the control group, they have the same baseline characteristic, because we don't want the sample in the treated or the control group, they have higher
Correct.
or lower endowment. So
Correct.
have you make sure that you already, I don't know what you call it, to see the endowment between the balancing between the treated and the control group? That is the first.
Okay.
And the second, maybe do you have any parallel trend checking? Because, well, maybe if we regarding the point number one of my question, if we have
I see.
the parallel trend check, we can see that if they have the same endowment or not in the baseline, or maybe the previous baseline. So maybe that is for me. Thank you, Pak.
Okay, Mas Ghifari, thank you very much. That is an excellent question. Unfortunately, this survey is done only for 2 time periods, so it's not possible to do a parallel trend check. I would like to think that before 2009, all the provinces is going to grow the same, but I don't think so, because one of the important thing that I mentioned in my paper is that Jakarta has been distinctly different with the other provinces. Jakarta is a single layer of political units. The other provinces are double layer or 2 layers of political unit, with the governor and the district's mayor or city mayors, right? So maybe that will that condition, that situation will violate the parallel trend assumption. So with that going in mind, I balance between the Jakarta and the control group by deploying matching techniques, but I did not do the propensity scoring matching, which is very popular for DID analysis. But I used entropy balancing. I don't have the entropy balancing with Heinmuller. This one. So if you're interested in like a balancing between the control group and the treatment group, this is an option that you can try. And I did that. And what else? Maybe let us see the result. That's after entropy balancing. So if we fail to confirm the parallel trend assumption, it's good to balance it using some matching techniques. And then after that, the coefficients is changing, is larger, but not that larger, but that's increasing. But the result is still significant. So I believe that this increasing change is happened due to the change in the leadership. And what is your other questions? Let me sample selection. So I think I use all the samples from that surveyed from the World Bank, and I triggered the panel options. And then I also triggered the they asked the interviewer if the answers given by the respondents can be trusted. So if they said yes, then I put that in the sample. If they said no, I drop that. So that I hope to get more reliable data. Did I answer your question already?
Okay, maybe because I just kind of puzzled because you jump from the methodology through the difference in differences, but I'm pretty interested with the entropy balancing. So maybe if you can display the results from the entropy balancing, and then I don't know if we use the propensity score matching, then we can use we can look at the common support between the treated and control. I don't know if it is in the propensity score matching, but I don't know about the entropy matching. But if you can display something like that, that would be wonderful. And regarding the parallel trend, yeah, unfortunately for the data, it's always about data limitation in Indonesia. But I think if we can match them in the baseline level, so we take the I don't know what you call it, the similar sample after the matching, and then keep it in the end line. I think we can minimize the error from the parallel trend.
That is the PSM.
Yes, I think the PSM, right?
Okay, okay.
The PSM, the ID, but I don't know about the entropy. But if you can maybe display the, I don't know how to make sure that
I see.
the sample is already matched. That will
Okay,
be great.
so the entropy matching or entropy balancing works the same way. It balances the samples between the treated group and the control group, but instead of dropping the numbers that is not matching, it leveled up or leveled down the numbers, so it doesn't drop the number of observations. So this is kind of new method. I'm not really aware, but then I'd like to test the strength of this result. So maybe in the future it could be an option for me to deploy the standard PSM model. The one of the things that I don't really enjoy using PSM, and I mostly used sample balancing, entropy balancing. But anyway, thank you very much for the suggestions that I can do that for the paper, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pak Bangkit. And any other
Thank
question,
you.
maybe? Okay. So I don't think there is any other question. And
Okay, thank you very much.
unfortunately, the last presenter can't attend the session, so we can end the session sooner. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Pak Bangkit, for the presentation and for the other presentation. Hopefully we can.
Stay safe. Goodbye.